Hey Eagle fans, it's EaglefanKarl, and well, that was a tough loss. I'm sitting here late Wednesday afternoon, and I couldn't make a video right after that game or even the next day after that game. I was just so upset about the way it turned out. The effort that some of our players played with was just despicable, and it took me a while to sort of get over some of my anger that I had towards the team at that lousy performance. And frankly, they deserved to lose that game. The way they lost it was what was especially upsetting. But the way they played that game the entire way, they deserved to lose that game, and they had no business winning it. And this goes back to what I was saying before, that I really think it's one of those things that this team's going to have to get used to, is that we're not going to be anyone's letdown game. Everyone's going to bring their best game against us, and we've got to be prepared to play our A game every week because other teams are going to be playing their A game. And it was just really a disappointing performance by the team to see them play the way they did, and specifically some players that I think maybe got a little full of themselves during the offseason. I think that's starting to show now. Specifically, one of the things that was great about our team last year is we won games in the trenches. We won on the offensive and defensive lines, and neither of those units has been playing up to their potential. And I think some of it might be some of the fact that maybe they feel like, hey, we're the world champs. We don't have to necessarily play our A game, but hopefully after this week that will have gotten completely shaken out of them, because it's obvious that they are going to have to play at the top of their game if they're going to expect to win every week. The other thing about this game too that I'll also admit that I was wrong on was Marcus Mariota looked a lot more healthy than maybe what we thought he was going to be. He was clearly able to throw the ball downfield, and he was giving his receivers opportunities to make plays, and I think our defense just gave up too many of those. From that respect, it wasn't going to be a game like I thought maybe it was going to be, where they were going to have to do a lot of dinking and dunking. And the fact that they were able to go for the big play obviously hurts us, because that's one of the areas where we're vulnerable. Let's go ahead, though, and give out some studs and duds. For studs, there are a few guys that I thought had good games that should get recognized. The only guy on defense that I thought played anywhere worthwhile in terms of showing up is my number 3 stud of the week, and that's going to be Malcolm Jenkins. I know he had the one penalty at the end of overtime, but for the most part in that overtime, he was making plays. He was doing everything he could to get them off the field. I think he was really trying to be a leader on that defense, but the guys around him just weren't responding. But Malcolm Jenkins, I think, was trying his best, and he was doing what he could on his end. My number 2 stud of the week is going to be Carson Wentz. I think he had a decent game. He certainly did what he had to on his end. With as well as our defense has played in the past, even on the road, you would have thought that putting up 23 points against the Tennessee Titans would have been enough. It's not like they had this prolific offense coming into the game. So putting up 23 points against that team and against that defense, you would think should have been enough, but unfortunately it wasn't. So I think Carson Wentz had a decent game, especially considering what he was up against with the rush that he was facing the whole game. And my number 1 stud of the week is going to be Alshon Jeffrey. He had a great game numbers-wise, and also the fact he's coming off the injury, he's coming off the illness, and he still puts up those great numbers. For that reason, my hat's off to him for having a great game. And I think Alshon Jeffrey deserves some recognition for that. So for that reason, he's my number 1 stud of the week. For duds of the week, though, I'm going to go ahead and break my rule of only allowing 5 studs or duds per week. I'm going to break that rule this week for duds, because this was such a bad loss that I think we need to call out guys that were involved. Before we get into that, though, I do want to give a dishonorable mention to the referees. Like I said, I'm never going to list them as a dud of the week if we lose the game, because I don't believe that is necessarily going to cost you a game. But there was some questionable calls they made on some of the PI calls. I know Jalen Mills wasn't the greatest defensive back, but I think some of those were questionable. I thought that especially with some of the stuff that they were calling, they weren't calling both ways, because there was a play early in the game where there was a ball that was underthrown to one of our wide receivers. I think it was Aguilar. He stops to come back for it. The defender runs into it. They don't throw a flag, but they're throwing similar stuff like that against us. So I think that they changed what they were calling partway through the game, and that's just really not the way it was supposed to go. They also missed some hits on Carson Wentz that I didn't think they could have called that they didn't. And, you know, given what the league's been trying to do with cracking down on hits to the quarterback, you would have thought that that would have been something that they would have picked up on. But getting to the real duds of the week, you know, I'm going to have a tie for 6th through 10th place on my duds of the week, and that's going to be the entire offensive line. And I think all 5 of those guys need to look themselves in the mirror and really wonder what it is that they're doing. Carson Wentz was just completely under duress most of this game. I know they only ended up with a handful of sacks, but it was a lot worse than what those numbers seem to indicate. And they didn't even play particularly well the week before against the Colts. And, you know, that's got to change. You know, you've got a guy back there who's mobile, yes, and maybe can extend some plays, but you've got to be able to give him some time. And he showed when he had time, he was able to make plays down the field. But there was so many times where he just did not have any sort of time. And blitz pickups were terrible. I'm not going to list him on here, but Wendell Smallwood, there's a reason why he doesn't play generally. And it's because he's lousy in pass protection. He's good running the ball, but then it gets to the point then when you have him out there, it almost telegraphs to the defense that you're going to run, because I certainly don't trust him in pass blocking. So it really becomes problematic to have him out there on passing downs. But the entire offensive line, I think, played terribly, and that was reflected in just some of the fact that some of the drives that got stalled, sacks that were given up, all that kind of stuff that really just sort of put this team behind the 8 ball so many times, and it really, I think, hurt us. My number 5 dud of the week, I'm going to go ahead and call out some coaching here. And Jim Schwartz, he refused to make some adjustments in the way he was calling his defenses. He was giving, you know, those receivers far too much cushion, I think at times. And you know, I know we were worried about getting burned deep, but maybe we need to pull our safeties back and playing like a cover 2 type of defense to keep the safeties back and allow the linemen and linebackers to make the plays against the running play. But we really never disrupted any of their routes, and it really sort of was frustrating to watch that over and over again. And some of the defenses he called on the 4th downs in the overtime were just, I think, really questionable. And it seemed like every time he should have blitzed, he didn't, and every time he did blitz, he shouldn't have. So everything he did seemed to go wrong this past week. Sort of the same thing then, along with, you know, my number 4 dud of the week is going to be Doug Peterson. And that has to do with the fact that, you know, normally he's very aggressive, and there was times where he was not aggressive in this game, and I think that really hurt them. I think specifically of the end of the first half, where you got the interception, you're up 7-3, you have a chance to go up to 14-3, you're sure you're in field goal range, you've got the 1 timeout though, it's 3rd down inside the 10-yard line. Why aren't you throwing that ball into the end zone? Running the ball and then trying to, you know, call a timeout and run 1 more play was ridiculous. There wasn't enough time for that, I don't think. The only play there was to throw the ball into the end zone, and why he's being, you know, super conservative there makes no sense. He also, I think, got conservative at the end of the game, where you sort of, it seemed like he was willing to settle for the field goal to tie it and get in an overtime. And then again, in the overtime, it seemed like he wasn't really aggressive trying to get the touchdown there as well. So just a bunch of things like that were uncharacteristic for him. And I think it really sort of ended up hurting us, you know, down the road. And then when you look at what Vrabel does on the other side, in terms of he's got the chance to go for the tie and get the field goal, and he decides to be aggressive, go for it on 4th and 2, and his team pays him off, and as a result, they win the game. So it just goes to show, lots of times, and as we know from watching what Doug did last year, aggressiveness can be rewarded in this league, and I think he just got too timid. My number 3 dud of the week is probably going to be what most people would put as their number 1, but I'm going to put him at number 3, and that's Jalen Mills. He's not having a good year. I don't need to necessarily go into all the mistakes and all the problems he had, but, you know, I think that, you know, it's clear that he really has a problem with receivers that have speed, and he cannot keep up with them. He gets burned on that double move way too many times, and he's going to, as long as he continues to make those mistakes, he's going to continue to end up on the duds list. My number 2 dud of the week is going to be Ronald Darby, and for him, it's another problem that we've seen over and over again, and that's his inability to tackle. And there was so many times where he could have had a guy down where they didn't. And I know necessarily cornerbacks aren't paid to tackle guys, but when you've got a guy like that that's in the open field, you need to make an effort to get him down, or at least delay him enough that the other defenders can come over and make a play. And it just always seemed like Ronald Darby was just acting like a bullfighter and you know, waving the guys through because it was terrible, the performance that he gave out there in terms of his tackling. And that actually drives me more nuts than Jalen Mills with some of the double move problems and all that kind of stuff. I think that is just a lack of talent, and he's trying to overcompensate for his lack of speed with making early breaks on balls, and then defenses are using that against him. With Ronald Darby, it's just a lack of effort to try and tackle a guy, and that bothers me more than a guy that just unfortunately just doesn't have the talent. My number one dud of the week, though, is going to be a guy for one play, and it was a terrible play, and it ends up costing us the game. 4th and 15, you've got to make sure you know where the wide receivers are going, and especially if you're playing in the sort of that zone defense where you're playing to the sticks, and then you're going to run forward to make a tackle. If that's the case, then you've got to make them catch the ball in front of you, and you can't let guys get behind you. And Corey Graham absolutely lets the guy get behind him, makes an easy catch on what should not have been. On a 4th and 15, you shouldn't be able to get an easy 19-yard out route to get the first down, and it just was terrible, the performance that he had. So for that reason, Corey Graham is my number one dud of the week. Let me know if you think I missed anyone with the studs and duds, and leave your comments below, and let me know if you think that there's someone that I should have listed higher or listed lower. Leave your comments below. Let me know what you think, like I said, and I'll go ahead and I'll be putting my prediction video up soon for the Vikings game, because I've got a different week because of some stuff I'm going to be traveling for from work. So I'll be putting up the prediction video very soon for the Vikings game. Until then, fly Eagles fly.